Christy, welcome to the Imaginals. I am so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank God that you are doing the work that you're doing right now because you're waking us all up to a more conscious way of consuming that is fun and easy and better for the planet. And I am particularly grateful because my family just watched that Netflix documentary By Now, directed
Yep.
by Nick Stacy, and we left feeling pretty disheartened about the elaborate corporate schemes and strategies to promote more consumption and hide our extraordinary waste. And I really can't quite believe that 3 of 5 garments that we buy end up in landfill. And just struck by this deep trance that we've all been a part of without consideration of what happens
Mm.
to the products that we buy at the end of their life cycle and really destroying the resources that are necessary for our survival. So your brilliance is needed now more than ever.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy you saw that documentary because
Ugh.
it is incredibly accurate and eye opening.
Mm. It really is. And the visual components of it were incredibly striking too.
I think they did a great job. I mean, I know it was quirky and people had feedback, but I just think the takeaway for me too is as you kind of just mentioned, which is that the consumer market has perfected the art and science of selling us more and more and more and more. And it's on a faster cycle than ever before.
Mm,
And yeah, there are so many upstream and downstream implications to that, but we need solutions.
we do. Okay, so there's a lot of fantastic podcasts out there that dig into your company, Trashy, and how it's transitioning the current fashion industry's linear take, make, dispose model to a circular economy model. But I'm really eager and excited to know more about your personal journey of transformation, how you've grown and how you've come to rise to this really audacious challenge. So, will you take us to a defining moment in your life that shaped your desire to tackle big challenges or really shaped your sense of self?
Yes. I mean, I think tackling big challenges has been kind of part of my nature since I entered the business realm. I actually spent my early years at Gap Inc., which is a huge institution, incredibly formative for me because it taught me the landscape end to end. But I was the person in the room who was always like, but why are we doing it that way? But what if we could do this? And
Totally.
so as a result, they gave me these opportunities to kind of build businesses within this huge organization, which was incredible. And I think the deeper I got into that experience, the more I realized the system was kind of fragile, I would say.
Mm.
Like a lot of people say broken. I actually look at it as like a very fragile and vulnerable system long run. And so I think through that, I became very passionate about improving it. And I think that's both from a business perspective. I love the creative element of the fashion industry. I love the math and science piece of the fashion industry. I have an engineering background. And so when I left Gap, I helped build this company called Mayette. And I think in that experience, it was truly transformative to say fashion could do something good for the planet and be beautiful and inspiring and amazing. And I spent 6 years really pouring my heart and soul
Mm.
into creating that company.
Will you tell our listeners a
Yeah.
little bit about Mayette for
Yeah.
context?
Yeah. So we were really the first luxury brand. We were positioned in the luxury market and we built, and this again was informed by my supply chain experience at Gap and seeing the really incredible and significant impact that fashion has on people and the planet through supply chain. And so with Mayette specifically, I just believed if you gave consumers alternatives and built more responsible businesses, but housed that in an incredibly inspiring and beautiful kind of experience that you could actually start to move markets. And so what we did with Mayette is we built a luxury brand. Um, which had never
It
been
was the
done.
most beautiful campaign with Daria Werbery. I'll never forget it.
It's so good.
It's
Like, all
so
the time,
good.
I'm like, they were so good.
Uh,
And, we pulled this amazing team together, but we built an artisan supply chain in 14 different communities all over the world. So, India, Kenya,
Africa.
Peru,
Yep.
Bolivia, Indonesia. It's just vast network of incredible artisanal talent that had never had access to markets. We redesigned kind of or co-designed, I would say, their craft to fit into our collections and then sold what we made to people like Barney's and Saks and Neiman's and Net. And it was really at the time, which was like 2012, 13, 14, transformative because it was never perceived like sustainability was still a very ugly word. And literally people thought it was going to be ugly. And
Yeah.
so it was
And it
important.
had been. It had been
Yeah,
crafty
it's
for the
terrible.
most part.
Yeah, it was terrible. And it was being able to elevate it to a level where like we showed in Paris during Fashion Week and could really compete on the shelves next to some of the, most amazing global brands was just an incredible accomplishment. And I think
Mm.
for me it was also then about the human component and the way that we worked with the artisans and the the kind of creative work we were doing as a team, the kind of business model evolution we were doing and proving out was all just
What
so
what
inspiring.
was the impact for those artisan communities? I can imagine that was so rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, I think like they basically had been doing their craft locally, selling through those traditional, in some cases, kind of crafty markets. And so being able to have a consistent partnership where they were improving or at least evolving their craft through a modern lens, but we really committed to having consistent kind of market access for them. So we never went and said, let's just do one season and leave, which a
Exactly.
lot of people do. They'll come and do like a shibori collection and then it like goes away,
Right.
you never see it again.
Right.
So what we did very intentionally is we said, how do we do this through the lens of like long-term engagement? So if you're an embroiderer, how do we evolve your craft so we can work with you every season? And that was
Beautiful.
just a consistency that they had never experienced before and that taught them, so much. We learned so much. We brought designers from Chanel in who were working with these crafts who were just like, oh my gosh, such a
Amazing.
different way of working. And so that was really the impact concept was this kind of access to market model and um, really elevating the value of that craft and then giving consumers an alternative, a conversation starter where you could say, hey, let's think about it. Let's talk about it a little bit.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So that was, an incredible run. And I think looking back on it, I love kind of reflecting on the deep commitment and the like truly soul fulfilling work that I was doing became so much an expression of my identity. But also, I just felt so passionately about the importance of the work and that it was beautiful and we could engage people in such a meaningful way. And then simultaneously, what was happening internally at the company was quite complicated at times.
Mm.
And I found myself 5.5 years in like this position of conflict and what the work was so important, yet I was finding like some things that were happening internally and externally in the company were just misaligned with my values. I
Yeah.
didn't have the words for it then. Like I I
What
couldn't
then
have
what were you feeling? How did you know that there was
yeah.
something that was misaligned?
Gosh, is that that's that body like knowledge. One, it felt like I was constantly fighting the wrong fight.
Mm.
Um
Which was what?
there were some ways that kind of partners in the business worked and operated that I didn't agree with. And
Yeah.
there were ways that we were building things that I didn't agree with. And they caused me a lot of pause because I was like, this is something that could be incredible, but we have to do it in a different way. And then there are certain people I think that operate from a place of ego all the time. And you can see it and watch it. And it
Yeah.
felt internally not correct to me.
Or that it was
Um,
just not aligned with your original intention for Mayette.
Yeah, and it just
Mm,
wasn't even aligned with the way I want to work in the world,
yeah,
how I want to move through space and engage with people. And if you think about the deep kind of intention behind the company, it was to really change lives. Like doing that with integrity, like the deepest integrity is so important. And when that starts to feel like questionable,
yeah.
it became a friction point for me that I couldn't reconcile.
Mm,
And so it was deeply difficult, like excruciating. And ultimately, it led me to the decision to leave. And so I
yeah,
had to leave this whole, entity behind, team experience and all of these things that could have been, but I couldn't find the path to get it there because there were these things in the way
yeah.
and it felt wrong. So that was incredibly challenging. Yeah.
Was I'm gonna just pause you for a second
Yeah.
because if you don't mind me probing
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
deeper, but like, what were you saying no to? Or where was the integrity breach? And this is not a question to point fingers, but if you were to talk about it from what you were taking a stand for specifically, I'm just curious to know. Sounds like in that moment, there was a real reckoning for you around how you wanted to do business and, you know, where you were going to draw the line around what you were willing to commit to doing. And I'm just
Yeah.
curious to know specifically what that was.
I think for me, I to this day, like with the business we've built, and almost maybe to a fault, I really like to operate from a place of authenticity and reality.
Yeah.
And when you're building something inspiring, people have a tendency to exaggerate or promise something way out here that they can't deliver.
Mm,
And not that you don't want to live in the future and aspirationally and like you're driving towards something massive. As you
yeah.
mentioned, what we're building is attempting to transform all of commerce. Like it's not without a big vision.
No small thing.
Just that. But for me, it's like let's do it, and that's why I use that word, like kind of values and integrity. Like every step of the way, let's do it deeply with what we have. Let's live in reality. Let's move it forward in a step function that benefits all stakeholders. I don't do really well um, with kind of posturing and kind of false promises.
Yeah.
And and then that becomes a really difficult thing to maintain. Like then the objective of what you're doing internally from a business perspective also lacks that integrity because you're trying to keep a thing alive or up that isn't real.
Yeah.
And so that for me has just become very important in everything that I do, which is interesting when you operate in a world of like VC backed companies. Like we see it time and time again. Like, but that's not real. Like what they're saying isn't real. So
Yeah, and the
yeah,
demands of needing to constantly be growing.
yeah, yeah. Constantly be growing. And I think there are ways to do that intelligently. Like I believe in growth. I believe in evolution. I believe in constant improvement. Like there are absolute ways to get there, but like doing that just with the backbone of the real work is incredibly important to me. Like you
Yeah.
have to measurably commit to doing the work the right way.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Yeah.
a critical foundation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay, so take us to that moment. So there you
Mhm.
were on the precipice of leaving, and then you
Yeah,
decide, I gotta go.
I've got to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got to go and really say goodbye to this thing that I love so much. And it kind of thrust me into this white space of like,
What's next?
what's next?
What do I do now?
Yeah, what do I do now? Where do I take this? And I think there's a part of me that can be very like practical and action oriented and like let's craft a plan and what are we going to do next and let's keep moving
Yeah.
and I'm
Sometimes that could be a real distraction just from the emotional pain of
it,
having to let
yep,
something
yep,
go.
process
Yeah.
and I think what it led me to doing and where I've then built this business for myself very differently, meaning the relationship I have to my business and how I move through the world now. I was incredibly fortunate to kind of dive pretty deep into some meditation work, some consciousness work, and like really like I remember a friend actually. I was like sitting on a curb in a parking lot talking to a friend in London, and I was like, I don't know. I just am like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do next and where. And she's like, well, what are your values telling you? And I was like, I have
Oh,
no idea how to answer that question. Like, and I realized at that moment that I was like, oh, I can't answer you. I've got work to do.
or, they were there,
Yeah,
like seeds
yeah.
planted, but you just didn't have the words to articulate what was most important to you, which is really what a value is. Right.
Entirely. Like what do you value most? Where do you want to put your time and energy? And I think it was just more you can get wrapped up, at least as I look at it in hindsight, you can get wrapped up in the process of achieving and accomplishing things in a way that you lose sight of how that relates to what your true intention or your true values are. And so it becomes much more externalized than internalized at that point. 'Cause that's
Yeah.
how I feel it is. It's out here operating versus like deeply in here. And so it was a great conversation and it was a real eye opener for me. And I was like, oh, we got to center, reground, do one of those
Get
moments.
clear.
Yeah, get clear and like find the
Yeah.
resources, find the people, start learning and really kind of diving into this space, um, which has been such a gift. And
Mm.
so, in hindsight, having to let go of something you love so much opened up a very different world to me, in the way I kind of operate and move through building things, move through relationship, move through like my own kind of state of being. And so I think without that, I wouldn't have really been able to shine that light at that moment. So that's,
Yeah, it sounds like it was a bit of a forcing event.
it was very forcing. Yeah.
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 So, will you give us some examples of how you are building businesses differently and how you are moving through the world differently
Yeah.
as a result of having left and what you're discovering along the way?
Yeah, I think again, taking a step back and getting kind of like I had someone who I was studying with around like consciousness actually look at me and he goes, you seem untethered. I was like, great.
Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. You're like,
What
you
gives you that impression?
yeah. No, I know what's going on. I always know what's going on. I know how to get stuff done. Like I can do anything. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. I'm untethered. And so I think for me, what that meant is really going down a journey of making sure I'm grounded. And I know people use that word a lot, but for me, it's really being in touch. It's being in touch internally, not just intellectually. Um, Taking steps very deliberately through that lens, knowing there will be challenges. Um, but I think now I build business in a lot less anxious way. And because there's a certainty that like it will move forward if you operate with that level of kind of alignment and integrity in a way that's much more probably inspiring, significant, and meaningful than you could have ever imagined if you try and control every little minuscule piece along the way.
Mm.
So, we were talking, I think earlier, and like the surrender component to all of it. But I think it's a much different, it's a much calmer way of doing things, but it's also much more kind of aligned.
And when you think about that and reflect on how you're doing things differently, is it
Yeah,
really a matter of actually just an internal shift to trust and acceptance and letting things unfold naturally and embracing whatever that is as a lesson to learn and grow? Or were there actual tactical things that you do differently or
they're
a combination of
yeah,
both?
yeah, no, it's definitely a combination of both because I think you have to kind of then translate that externally. So things for me become, I don't want to say less personal, it's not less passionate or less dedicated, but in moments of, I think when you're in a startup, it's just hard and there are things that go wrong all the time.
Like
Like
yesterday when you're
yesterday, like
this
things
tech
just,
snafu?
yeah, just things collapse and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so it's really then starting to go into a mode of, okay, let's diagnose, let's solve the problem, let's take steps forward. It becomes way less like, what happened, hair on fire, who's to blame? Like I
Yes.
don't actually kind of care who's to blame. Like I care what happened and why. Um, but it becomes this very like clear problem solving orientation, and it's in really in service to getting to the next step, and in service to getting to the next step, and in service to getting to the next step. And so that is practical application for me. And then saying, okay, what is in service? Like, where's the next best move? How do we improve this? How do we collaborate? How do we communicate? How do we work with people to fix whatever's going on? Or how do we work with people to celebrate? How do we work with people to build? How do we, really think through kind of that community element of what we're doing? And it's a lot in practical application. Again, it's a lot calmer and more methodical and very kind of, it allows for more building, actually, which is exciting to me.
It sounds a lot less dramatic and emotional.
Yeah, it's just not.
Yeah.
There's no point.
Since we're on the topic of like
Yeah.
hiccups and,
Yeah.
failures or mini failures, whatever you want to call it, is there a failure or a misstep that taught you the most about yourself as a leader and a person that comes to mind?
A failure or a misstep. Yeah, I mean, there are a few failures and missteps. I mean, I think it's probably thematic, to be honest, now that I'm thinking it out loud, which is like, it kind of goes back to like both intuition and sticking to, I would say, not trusting your inner knowledge to me, and like having external forces be like, you've got to get this done, you've got to do it this way, and listening to that. And so there have
Mm.
been times in this recent business experience where outside opinion has been, well, common consensus is, or the market tells you, or if you don't do this. And it can be growth, it can be spend, it could be strategy. There have been a few different points along the way, and every time it doesn't feel correct to me and I do it anyway, it never works out.
Mm.
So it's not like an epic failure, it's actually like a series of of a lot of failures.
Just missteps when you don't listen to your intuition.
Yeah, when you're just like, that
Yeah.
thing wasn't right, and look, here we are, and it didn't, and now we're cleaning up for it. And so
What's so interesting too, because your genius seems to be in that innovative problem
sure,
solving place.
yeah, it
So it's
is.
likely not going to be what consensus tells you ever.
Precisely. Like, follow the formula is just gonna give you the same.
Formulas hasn't worked so well so
No,
far.
the amount of times I say that, like, in a week, where I'm like, "Great, so that's a great analysis. How are those businesses doing?" But I think, yeah, I think that's right, and it's not without, like, learning from everybody. Like, I love taking on information and being questioned and challenged, like, love being challenged. Let's work it through. But there are
It's the
times when,
blind following that becomes problematic.
yeah, when you feel like you're just being battered around by the person who has the loudest voice in the room because they think they're right. And at a certain point, it breaks you down, and you're like, okay, we'll just go in that direction. It's never correct if it
Yeah.
doesn't feel correct, and it doesn't, like, there's the logic piece and then the feeling piece. And so I would say, yeah, typically it's been about like a growth choice or like a lot of times it's like a kind of business trajectory, or shouldn't you guys take this path because isn't that what everybody would think is better? Yeah.
Totally.
And you're like,
That's like
well, I don't know if that's,
maybe
yeah, maybe, but maybe not.
one of
Sometimes
the
stronger than that. Yeah.
well, I was just going to say that one of the things that I've noticed about you and your interviews is that I hear you use the words what if a lot in your interviews and in the articles
Yeah.
that I've researched. And I just love this question so much because it has the power to radically shift the context of a problem and challenge our perspective.
Mm,
And it helps us consider more than one possibility. And I know for myself, anytime I feel really dug in about something or badly about myself or convinced of something, that question always shakes that up enough for me just to see a little bit more light,
mm.
and room for movement towards the goal that I'm seeking. Is that question like a conscious part of an exercise that you undertake? Or
No, I have
have I
no
just
idea what
pulled
you're
something that
describing.
I've
You
noticed about
probably,
you
like,
that
reflected no, you reflected something I've never, like, pattern recognized, which I love. Um, it's an interesting one because I do probably just naturally occupy that state. I feel like one of the things that I do particularly well, sometimes, like, earlier than people kind of like, it confuses people because it's quite early in in a journey or a trajectory of, like, a business evolution or a community or, consumer behavior, is I'm like, but can't you see it? What if it operated this way? And then you can start to challenge your hypothesis and find where it would break, and then you rebuild it again, and then you do the same thing, and then you rebuild it again, and it evolves kind of your thinking in that line of questioning, but it also sets this
Mm.
really great direction and intention because what if the whole world could operate, with in our world where everybody every day is recycling the things that are unwanted and they're fully regenerative, and if we didn't think that way, I wouldn't know what to build tomorrow.
Mm. Yeah, it's
That's
a
another way.
really
Yeah.
important mindset of possibility when
Yeah.
you're in the business of behavioral and systems change, it sounds like. And
Yeah, I think, I mean, when you're in behavioral and systems change, like, you have to understand, the levers that are just pure logical incentive, but you do actually have to understand the emotional components to it, like where people are and where they're stuck and where they're headed and how quickly and how you get them there. So there's something very, like, tactical, but there's also something quite human.
human.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's funny, in my coaching business, I work with a lot of well intentioned folks who envision a very different and more fulfilling future for themselves, but they feel stuck, which is why they're talking
Yeah.
to a coach in the first place, and unsure of how to get what they want, and are ultimately unconsciously resigned to having things stay
Mm.
the way that they are. And I sense the same is probably true for consumers these days. Like they value sustainability, but their actions don't match those values. And I think I heard you say that 88% of people have expressed interest in purchasing more sustainably, and 48% just don't know how. And so, my question is, do you think this is really a question of willingness or accessibility?
I think it's a question when you talk about willingness and accessibility, it actually boils down to convenience and value. So I know those are two
Mm,
different words, but we have a world, and it kind of goes back to, I think lives are complicated for everyone. They're busy for everyone. They're more
yeah.
expensive than ever before for everyone.
Hmm.
And I think when you say, well, what's my intention when I sit here and just close my eyes? Of course, I'd love to make better choices. But at the end of the day, my to do list is like this: my kid needs new shoes. I've got to get to school. My work. And so accessibility, yes. And I think people use that as like, well, it's too expensive or it's not good quality. And I think that is correct. But I think it's actually made worse by the fact that people have perfected convenience and value in the alternative choice.
Right.
And so at the end, it comes almost to, hierarchy of needs. Like, where can I fit this in to my equation? And I don't have anything extra:
Yeah.
time, money, attention, knowledge. I just don't have it. Um, so I think that's part of it. Like, you have to kind of meet people where they are. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's really important to in consumer land. I also think about it through, like, what are you suffering from? Like, where are your pain points? And I think sustainability often moves into this space of like, wouldn't it be great? And you're like, sure. But practically speaking, like, who's going to care? How are they going to get there? Like, you've got to kind of move into the space of like, am I making your day better? Am I making your life better right now, today? And if so, when and for how much? Um,
That's
because
a
like,
really
what,
compassionate view. It is.
yeah, I mean, it's,
I think that's essential.
yeah,
You know, when we're working with a consumer mindset that also has been conditioned to see clothing as disposable because of this myth essentially that there's,
yeah,
never enough or more is better, and or it's hopeless because everyone else is polluting too, that generates this kind of fear and drives us to buy more because we don't want to be left out. And then on top of that, I see, like, at the root of this, just on the most human level too, that our consumption seems so inextricably tied to that feeling state we're talking about, and that desire to fill a void that's ultimately within ourselves, that no amount of clothing or the most beautiful Mayette jacket, made
no,
in, beaded in Kenya, could, possibly fill. And, the trying to upend that sort of juggernaut of, if I have this thing and when I get
yeah,
this item, then I will feel something or be happy, feels uh,
yeah,
complicated and
yeah.
difficult. But I guess that's why I'm in the business that I'm that I'm in.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't coin this phrase, but I think it's so accurate and it applies to what you're saying, which is this constant feeling of not enoughness.
Yes.
And so when we live in that not enoughness state, like we think to your point, like the next thing, the next picture, the next post, whatever it might be is going to make us enough, and it never will.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love beautiful things. I've been working in a space of making them. It's not that they can't be super emotional and additive, and like beauty is amazing and art is amazing. But yeah, I think we've moved also into this hyper speed of dopamine rush that's made it just all worse.
Yeah.
So that is a factor. And then to
Yeah.
get, unplug people from that. I mean, I always say this concept of being like, buy fewer things is not actually a business model.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out how to reprogram some other way.
Yet. It's not a business model yet.
There's a wave, but it's, from a macro trend perspective, we're not seeing it in the numbers. So I think we have to take different angles. Like there's got to be another way in to make people reassess.
This is a perfect segue to tell everyone a little bit about how Trashy does that. What
Sure.
is that innovative
Yeah.
business model
Yeah.
that you've developed in order to do that?
Yeah. I mean, I think we were working, and personally, I was working in circularity innovation for longer than most, and like the engineer side of me was like, let's build this perfect regenerative system. We should totally do that. Why are we putting all these resources into landfill? Duh. This is crazy.
Not logical.
Yeah. I've been on the supply chain side. Like, do you know how much goes into that? Why are we doing this? And it's humbling to kind of take something so theoretical and put it into market and say, okay, well, how will people respond? And I think that's why I feel so strongly about um, getting in there and understanding the pain points,
Yeah.
because you just launch this like perfectly utopic system, and if nobody is lives are improved, nobody cares, nobody does it. um and so for us, what we found is in our journey and kind of being in market with these concepts and like ways to recycle, is that we can boil it down to something really simple, which is that most people are struggling with too much stuff, and it's
Yeah.
for a lot of the reasons that we discussed. And nobody's really shown up in that moment to say, we'll help you. Let's make this
Yeah.
better for you.
Oh my
And
God, you
so,
should see just the bags of clothing and batteries I have in my closet that sit there for months because I can't make it to, or sometimes don't know where to take it, if
yeah,
they'll take it.
exactly. I'll
Yeah,
get you a 6 pack. Sounds like you might
please.
need a six
No,
pack.
no, I'm going to buy it. I'm here to support the cause.
I'll get you a 6 pack. We also just launched our tech take back. So what we did is we said, and we stepped in and we said, let's make it really easy for you to get rid of that pile that you don't know where, know what to do with. But let's do it with a lot of transparency around how we're shifting things from landfill to recycling, from landfill to refurbishment, from landfill to reuse. And so we've made the customer experience really kind of feel as similar and fun as buying something on Amazon. And I think that's important because that's where we live. That's where we shop. Like the average consumer is going through this commerce motion
Yeah.
constantly.
Yep.
So having the uncommerce motion, meaning the post-consumer moment, the getting rid of the stuff that you no longer need needs to feel as easy and simple and modern and digitized. And so we've created these really fun methods for doing that. We have big bright pink bags that you can send all your clothes back in. We have boxes for electronics, and you get them at home and you can do it when you want. And you return it to us through UPS like you do an Amazon return. And so
Amazing.
that
I'm getting
ease and that,
everyone a take back bag and putting it
yeah,
in their stocking this year.
it's a great stocking stuffer. And
Yes.
then I think on the back end for us, we've incentivized that behavior by building a big kind of rewards platform where you can start to kind of access certain deals and save on things broadly. I think important, it's not just, hey, recycle your jeans, buy more jeans. It's like recycle your jeans, go buy dinner or a movie ticket, or
Have an experience.
ideally have an experience, learn something new, take a class. And that's really where we're building that kind of incentive model to be much more comprehensive and give people options of non-consumerism in their next step. And then behind the scenes,
Amazing.
we've built a huge kind of network of recycling infrastructure, so we can keep, as those statistics that you've seen in the Netflix documentary and otherwise. It's really easy to just say, like, on average, about 85% of what we consume ends up in landfill. Textiles, electronics, toys. And so through our supply chains, we can keep 95% of it out of landfill. And it
Wow.
really is through this lens of value capture. Like, we're taking those materials and doing something else with them, in these categories that do have value. Like, these are not, a bottle top. Like, we're talking about whole garments that can be
Right.
reworn, or like an old phone that's just got a cracked screen and it's from 2012. Like,
Yeah.
there are things in there that we can uh, use again that are very valuable to kind of eliminate that dependency on raw materials. Long run is the goal. And then you move this incentive cycle such that the market's moving with us. So brands are incentivized to participate, customers are, and that's the thesis at work in trying to shift the consumer market.
What has it been like to propose these partnerships to other brands? Have they been receptive from the very beginning, or has it taken some time to convince
Yeah.
them that participating in the model is a good idea?
Um, uh, the the economics are compelling, which is really intentional. I think everybody's on a different in a different stage on their journey. Really, where we find receptivity is when we can make a business case for it.
Yeah.
And so,
Surprising.
yeah, shocking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, so you can make money this way. You'd be like, oh, now we're paying attention. But that was intentional in the model. Like, I knew that going in. I was like, I've been
Yeah.
on the other side. Like, I know what those conversations sound like. Like, at the end of the day, if you're a cost center doing it because it's the right thing to do, you're the first person to get cut.
Yeah.
And so you have to come up with something that's easy to execute, and meaningful from an economic perspective to get folks to participate. So that's what we've done in designing this, and that is what works. And I think, the world will get here. It's just a matter of timing. We can't keep doing it the way we're doing it.
No. I want to go back for a second
Yeah.
just to, because you're an engineer, talking about systems change and maybe back to the customer.
Yeah.
And then we'll relate to this to Trashy's marketing, which is really fun and spunky, and I really appreciate it. Um, but I've been interested in Otto Schrammer's work and the inner development goals, and he says that you can't understand a system unless you change it. I'm going to say this again because I just had that. Can you hear that through here? That ding? Oh, good. Okay. Hopefully it's not showing up here. I'm going to say it again. So I'm not interrupted. But Otto Schrammer says you cannot understand a system unless you change it. You can't change a system unless you transform your consciousness, and you cannot transform consciousness unless you make a system see and sense itself.
Mm,
So essentially, what he's saying is that we are not making conscious, sustainable choices because we have a lack of awareness and disconnection, mainly from nature and each other and ourselves.
yeah.
And the reason why some of those movies can be so impactful is because it allows us to really sense the magnitude of the issue. And of course, that story is not the most fun and uplifting. And so I'm curious to know, how do we make this dysfunctional fashion system see and sense itself in a way that's empowering instead of destabilizing? And how do you think about that in terms of your marketing and storytelling?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think to say to start with the doom and gloom is never that inspiring. It's good information. Um, but I think if that's if the intention behind that is to motivate action, it often has a temporary impact that's not lasting.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing where we look at it as information is great, education is great. But I go back to the fact of like it comes down to an individual's experience. And so how are you feeling today? What can I solve that matters to you today?
Mhm.
Really is the best approach. And obviously you want to come up with an answer that can speak to a whole bunch of people. You can't do that one by one.
Nope.
Um, but if you can find kind of common threads and common themes, which you usually can, and you're creating solutions for that, that to me is the gateway to more examination. And what we found anyway is again going back to, oh gosh, I can just help you with your problem. Instead of being like, did you know that you're ruining the planet with your consumerism? Like
Right.
nobody's excited
Shame
about
and
that.
blame doesn't work
No.
well.
Like
No.
we take shame and we turn it into joy. And
Yeah.
that's really important. But it is a self examination moment when you're filling up a bag, when you're putting stuff in a box and you're like, wow, I'm really like, I had somebody say who's been a regular customer was had a personal goal of needing fewer bags next year. And I was like, what a
Love
great
that.
feedback loop, right? Like we've given
Yes.
you a measurement by which like you can actually judge your success.
Yeah, like your carbon footprint. It's a tool, right? How many
It's a
bags
tool.
did I fill?
How many bags
Take
did I
back
fill? Oh,
bags.
last year was 10, this year was 5. Like,
Yeah,
go
I
me.
must be consuming less or just actually
Yeah.
utilizing the clothing
Or
that I
I'm
bought.
hanging on to what I purchased or whatever it might be. So I think
Yeah.
I think societal shifts in some ways happen one person at a time in
Mm.
aggregate. And so what we've found and what we've really worked on is what where is that common pain point? What is a common solution? And it's allowed us, which I think is always surprising to people, to build a very large community quite quickly. So we launched Trashy in January. We have 350,000 people using our service.
Wow.
Like,
Good for
that's
you.
like real participation. That's not just, the sustainability evangelist who's also buying all their groceries in bulk and making their own toothpaste. Like,
Right.
right?
We
Like,
have some of those here in Boulder. I know
like
those people.
bless them.
But
But
I
like,
mean, it's amazing.
bless them. But like, we need to speak to the people who just went to Target to pick something up and like,
That's right.
and that's I think, and so for me that comment about, systems change, like it does actually have to happen first and work on a micro level and really speak to people's lives in a way that matters to them.
Yeah, and that gives me so much hope. And one of my questions for you was like, how do you stay resilient when Temu and Shen are pumping out product the likes of 2 to 10,000 SKUs
I
to
know.
their website daily, which is
Really.
really just hard to wrap your head
Yeah.
around.
It is
Um,
hard to wrap your wrap your head around how there are that many eyeballs looking at all those products. But I get really clear on the role that we play because like I can't fix the bad actors, and like they're working with a market mechanism that is firmly in place. Like
Yeah.
they've hacked supply chain, they've figured it out. Like it or not, smart, impactful, terrible maybe, but so I think we just stay really clear on the role we can play and stay really
Mm.
focused on like how we do that and how we do that with excellence, how we continue to build value. I try not to get so consumed with the like, again, the world is ending macro doom and gloom, because I think you can lose sight. Stay focused on like the magnitude of what we can do, which we view our roles like we can play a part in collection and sorting. Circularity does not work without it.
Yes.
Circularity is super important. So do I still believe, like I ask myself this, I ask my team this all the time. I'll talk to my like board about this. I'm like, do we believe circularity is the future? If the answer becomes no, we need to have a different conversation. As long as that
Back to
is,
integrity.
yeah, we need to have a different conversation. But if the answer is still yes, then where can we be most impactful in its transformation? And let's stay really focused on that because we can't solve all the problems, but this one we've got a pretty good head start in getting there. And so, and then it's creating great experience, creating value, speaking to consumers like humans, not making them feel guilty about just living in the world that they kind of are that's
That
inundating
we're
them. Yeah,
co-creating.
yeah. And so that's how I stay grounded in what we're doing. But it's I don't know if it's my nature, if it's like been developed over time. Like I constantly question and reset back to those big questions. Do we believe this is the future? Do we believe what we're doing is having an impact? Do we believe that there's a path forward in a big impactful way? And if the answers keep coming back yes, we keep going.
I think it's a brilliant, tracking device essentially that keeps you on your course of
Yeah.
integrity
Yeah. It really,
and
yeah.
sounds like a reflection of that commitment to,
Mhm.
yeah, doing what we say we're going to do and what is actually going to make an impact.
Yeah. Do we believe this is where it's going? And there are times when you're like, well, we thought maybe it was here and it's actually a little bit over here. So we've got to shift. That's fine too. Yeah.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you about that because I think I read somewhere that you shifted the business model from 4 days, which was a
Yeah.
prior company, within 4 months of launching it. Is that true?
No, it wasn't
No.
really that fast. We had 40s from really 2018 to 2022.
Okay.
So it was 4 years. We used it as an we shifted the original we fair in that assessment that we launched with a subscription model based in clothing recycling, but it was at the individual like brand level. And the subscription was confusing to people. Like it was way too far ahead. People
Maybe we should
subscribing.
tell listeners what 4 days was originally
Sure, yeah,
so
yeah,
they
yeah.
can understand.
Well, really, I mean, and it's coming off my background, but being deeply committed to figuring out circularity, I came through this lens of brand engagement. And so we built a clothing brand that was kind of really built with utmost integrity from a regenerative perspective. So all the clothes were fully recyclable. We believed we were in a product category that people could easily kind of see a utility around recycling t-shirts and sweats and that type of thing. And we were trying to figure out the financial model there. And there were a lot of things that like unlimited rental happening in the market. And so we tested a bunch of stuff out. So I think, have been consistently and almost, I think it probably drove people crazy, but I'm not afraid to be wrong and be like, well, that was wrong. Let's keep going. So that was, this is not correct. Let's try again. Let's try again. Let's try again. And so we did that with the 4 days iteration quite a few times actually in figuring out, what is the right incentive model? What is the thing? What we discovered later in that journey, a little bit like post really middle of COVID, post COVID, is like it wasn't actually about the t-shirt, it was about the stuff.
Mm,
And so that was my true
the aha.
aha. And we started saying, well, what if we just took the stuff? Like, don't worry about recycling that t-shirt. What about what about the pile? And we were just inundated. like overnight. Like we were running our own facility in Los Angeles and taking our products back and processing them. And we used old packaging that was sitting around because I'm like, let's just see if people send us their stuff. I was like, I don't know what else to do with these bags. And we did. And we got so
Wow.
much work. We started to have to kind of like rent containers in the parking lot to put it in. It was
Come
like,
on.
yeah. And so
Wow.
that's the benefit of not being afraid to be wrong because like you'll never
Yeah.
find the thing if you're so stuck on the original idea being perfect. It's like it might not be perfect. Just you gotta be okay being
Fine.
like, well, it doesn't
And
work.
just get curious about the need.
Yeah. Get curious about the need, figure out where people's pain point is. And like we had enough of a kind of insight that people were curious to participate in this. We knew that like there were enough people who were like, yeah, I really don't want to keep everything in my drawer anymore. But we needed to find the sweet spot. So
Beautiful.
that was the journey. And then in 2023, yeah, I similarly kind of said this concept of recycling the too much stuff in your life is a really big idea. And people who want to participate are broad in demographic and geography. We need to open the lens, the aperture on how we incentivize this and who we can play with in the consumer space to get this really to become a default behavior. Like we're trying to create a new habit. You know, again, the what if.
Takes lots
Like,
of practice.
yeah, for sure.
Does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
It's
does.
like
Yeah,
going to the gym, building a muscle,
yeah. Learn when it doesn't go right. So
but the rewards make it a lot sweeter and more fun.
yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Um, this is a bit of a tangent, but like, what's your experience with eco anxiety or grief? I feel like I already know the answer to this because you're such an optimist and committed
Yeah.
to finding the solution. But like, what keeps you up at night right now?
Ah, I mean, the eco anxiety, again, I try and stay out of the land of panic and move more into the world of like, where is the system broken? And I think that's just my coping mechanism, potentially.
Mm.
Um, m- but I do, I am, I think it's coupled with, I have a young child, and I think about the speed of consumption coupled with the speed of media and the speed of inputs. And that actually deeply gives me like anxiety about society.
Yeah.
And that's a deep stack problem, meaning there are so many participants reinforcing that and profiting from that. That's troubling to me on a deep level.
What do you do with that feeling?
I mean, find glimmers of solutions and hope and try to move into that space, like decode the problem. Again, it's probably my logic brain being like, there's a solution. We can solve this problem. Like keep keep phones away from my children. I don't, you know,
It's a good one.
basics. I think you go back to it and you're like, okay, let's strip out what's, at least we can identify as the real issue. I think the systemic solution is going to be tougher and longer.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, in other eco I get really anxious about food quality.
Mm.
Not a space I work in, but something
Wh-
that
What in
matters a lot.
particular?
Um, any type of just commercial farming and toxins, water, like the basics.
Yeah.
When you think about it's living around us constantly. Um,
Microplastics
yeah, in our bodies, in our organs, like,
in our
and
fish.
I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how we're gonna stop that machine.
Mhm.
Makes me want to just go live on a farm and like not
In
buy
Costa
anything from
Rica,
anywhere. It's
grow
like,
your own food.
yeah, you do. You're like, maybe that's
Thank
not
God for
good.
the regenerative farmers out there.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those things, like the health and safety and wellness, psychologically, emotionally, and physically,
Yeah.
those are the pieces that I just feel big.
Yeah. They do feel big.
Yeah.
How do you balance the demands of startup world and your family now that you're a mom?
Mm, yeah. I mean, I think it's always hard. Like there's just a lot, but I think the journey to bring it back to the experience that I had building Mayette, where it was all in all the time,
Yeah,
like 100%
nonstop.
nonstop. And I mean, I'm resilient and indefatigable in so many ways, but there is a really healthy art to having moments where you shut off and be present for your family. It's super important. And I think had I not done that interim work of like going back to like values and integrity, like that is the most important thing to me is my family. So it becomes a very easy choice. Like you're always balancing. I'm not going to be like class mom anytime soon. I love those women who
Oh,
do
no?
that.
I
No.
went to my kids' field trip the other day and to a ice skating rink, and of course I was like the parent that had to leave like halfway through the day, and then there was another mom was like, "Can I get a ride with you too?" And I thought, working moms,
Working
we're like
moms.
trying to juggle
Yeah.
it all.
Right.
We're
So
here, we're here, but just not for
weird.
the whole day.
Not the whole day. I'll show up for the end of
No,
the holiday party and
that's
like,
right.
yeah. So I don't know. So I think, it's not a perfect science, but I think it's easier for me now than it would have been,
Yeah.
you know, a good 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So I had the kid late and just in time to be slightly more evolved on the topic.
Yeah, me too. What
So
else is up there with family and in terms of your values?
yeah, family. I mean, I do value achievement and accomplishment like that progress kind of component to things.
Yeah.
Really important. I'm an incredibly curious person. I value beauty and creativity. I also have an art background. Actually studied classical painting in college while studying engineering.
I heard
So
you
like
are also a ballet dancer.
I was a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's my first love. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's really important to me. I have to remember that. I have a really good friend who's an amazing artist and creator and just of worlds and otherwise. And I talked to her and she's like, "Have you been creating? Like, you've got to do it." So that's something that's harder because it's just me to fit in. But
Yeah.
yeah.
But so important. It's
Hmm.
also just so important to create for creating's sake without it needing to be something
Yeah.
or be successful,
Yeah.
without having to prove anything or have people like it,
Yep.
just for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Just for you. And
Mhm.
then, yeah, I think the extension of family is relationships and friendships and deep connections. Those are important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How has your definition of success evolved from those early days at Gap to now?
Yeah, I don't think I was like that conscious of what success felt like then. Meaning more, I was just always on to like next stage, next step, accomplishment, like kind of a winning mentality,
Mm.
which I still have. I'm a very competitive person. Love to win things. It's all good. My dad's the same. It's quite funny. My mom's always like, "You two are insufferable." Like,
Yeah. Don't want to play games with you over the Christmas holiday.
well, so is my mom. She's totally like stealth about it. But I think so. There's that sense of, and that's why I say like value accomplishment, like the progress, the winning is a piece of it. I think for me, it's defining why. So why do I want the success versus it for the sake of it or for how other people define it? That I've just become much more conscious about, which is, if it's a financial outcome for my business, a why, and what is that, and for whom? Like, I have investors. Like, where does that fit into my matrix? So it's much more specific, and I think it's much more personal,
Mm.
um, and it goes deeper than it did prior, which is much more just accomplishment, win, points on the board. And now it's a why. And it might be accomplishment win points on the board, but if the why doesn't matter to me, like that's a question on whether we should spend time there.
Great
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah. Thanks.
So, I like to ask as a final question on every episode our guests to share one strategy, practice, tool, a resource, a book, or piece of advice that has served you on your path of transformation. So what might you recommend someone who's in the middle of a pivot or on the precipice of a big life change or realizing that they have to let go of something that they've poured their blood, sweat, and tears
Yeah.
into and start fresh?
This is hard to answer with one answer. I
I
was
know.
like
Well, you
thinking
can
about
give a
it.
few. Okay, we've got
Well,
time.
I was reflecting. And it's interesting because like I've been a long time listener reader of Wayne Dyer, who I feel like was like an original and
Yes.
totally sparked something in me very early days that like set me on this level of like spiritual curiosity
Mm.
and
What was that specific thing are you about to tell us?
well, no, it was somebody. It's funny because I saw somebody else post about this recently, but somebody I was in between undergrad and business school, and I took an acting class, which was so random. But I took it because I had been a ballet dancer. I missed creativity. I missed performance, and I had this window of not having to be anywhere.
Rare.
I know, very rare. And I took this acting class. And I ended up in, like, the play, which, of course, is, like, so classic, where I'm, like, all these, like, really serious actors, and I'm, like, in the play, and I'm, like, hanging out with all these people.
Hilarious.
And I became really friendly with this one person, and he was, like, deep into, like, meditation and doing all these things, and he's like, "You should just listen to these tapes." I mean, dating myself, like, they were tapes. I'm like, "I have a CD player, like, what are you talking
On
about?"
your
Like,
Walkman?
yeah, I was like, "Where are you playing these tapes?" And what I did is because I couldn't really, like, play the tapes, I bought the books, and I'm a big reader, and so I started reading, and I just, like, fell into them, and it felt like it was speaking to me. And I can't remember even, like, like, what was the How to Get What You Really Want was one of the early ones, and then, since then, like, Manifest Your Destiny, like, all sorts of just amazing work, and so it opened
That's
me up
like the
to that.
Bible.
Yeah,
Manifest your destiny.
it is, right? Have you
Yes.
listened to, Neville Goddard?
No.
Oh, I'm gonna send you links. He's like the
Okay.
OG.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Oh,
Please
yeah.
do. I'm
Like
ready.
old school,
Okay.
and it's all the same principle, like, Wayne Dyer pulls from him,
Mm,
anyway, it's amazing. So all of that work, and I think, like, getting into a meditation practice actually kind of towards the end of my tenure at Mayette was something I dedicated to, and that gave me the space to really connect with these concepts and theories that had resonated with me, but, like, I needed to internalize.
mhm.
Um So that was incredibly pivotal, and then, I was thinking about it in preparation for you mentioned Michael Singer, that was also really pivotal to read
Yeah.
The Surrender Experiment, that was
He
amazing.
does incredible work.
Yeah,
His podcast is actually, I think, the easiest way to
yeah,
take in his teachings.
and
Yeah,
then yeah, and then I did this consciousness course, that was pretty hardcore and was great. It was like a no bullshit, strip it down, like, this is what's going on, and it's very aligned with the Manifest Your Destiny. I say all of that to say I was listening randomly to a Tim Ferriss podcast. I don't listen to Tim Ferriss. I have no idea why I chose to listen to a Tim Ferriss podcast on this
synchronicity.
long,
It showed up.
like, on this long drive with my daughter, and the woman speaking was Diana Chapman.
Yes, from the Conscious
And
Leadership Group.
yes,
She's
exactly.
fantastic.
And she so clearly and simply explained, the concept of EQ, IQ, and your body intelligence. And when she went through the kind of dynamic of that and said, okay, you have hard yeses. There's like absolutely done. Great. You have super hard no's, like never going to do that. But we mostly live in this weird middle. And the fact that a soft no or even a soft yes is actually a no.
Yeah, the full body yes meditation.
But it was that like we live in that nuanced space of like I'm not sure is
Yeah.
actually a no. And that to me was like game changing.
In what way?
Well, because when you're sitting in that space, like, do I want to do this thing? Should I move in this direction? Like, iterating on that, if you have hesitation, being conscious that that's like not a compromise you need to make in that moment. Iterate to find the yes or it's a no. Clears
Makes it
things
pretty
out.
simple.
Clears things out pretty quickly.
It does, and it also is rooted in that body wi it's also
Yeah.
rooted in that body wisdom that we're
Yeah.
talking about, because
Yeah.
we can s we can get so depleted and waste so much energy trying to cognitively untie these knots when our body knows all along
It's
that it's
you're
a no.
slowing your brain. You're not even in your heart, you're in your brain. And it's like, yeah, just get in there and be like, my body does know.
Yeah,
And it might not be like it's an absolute no, but it's not a no in this form. Work on the form, work on the time factor, work on the people factor. And if you get to a yes, great. And if you don't, not
yeah,
doing that.
yeah. Beautiful.
It's just a practice. It's like a practice. I love it.
That's
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put that information in the show notes because
Yeah.
there is a meditation around that that can help you define what your full body yes
Yeah. Yeah.
is, which is
So
great.
good. Yep.
Beautiful. Okay, this is a beautiful place to wrap. Where can people find out more about you, Trashy, follow you?
Yeah. I mean, Trashy is Trashy with an IE. So TRASHIE.io. That's where you can see what we do. You can mostly see me on LinkedIn, as far as kind of work and concepts there. Um, I'm pretty private otherwise on social. You can see find our company at
Good for
Trashy.
you.
Yeah, but that was a choice I made at one point. So yeah,
Good.
yeah. Going back to the things that feel like you need to operate with integrity. So yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah.
All right.
Check us out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been such a pleasure.
Oh, such a delight.